Look, there is no referent. All phenomena have no self-nature. Everything is the functioning of Brahman. That's it. That's the formula that you need to know to achieve awakening. You could say it's a Mahavakya. I believe that means a great phrase. I'm not quite sure what Vakya means, but basically that's what it amounts to, right? I am that. Tat Tvam Asmi. That's a Mahavakya. And those are mine that I would suggest to you as well, in addition to all the other great ones out there. Like, I'm the man. No, I'm just kidding. But, no, yeah, so there is no referent. That means that within the experience of consciousness, in the six senses that you feel through your body, the body apparatus, right? This is an apparatus. It's like a machine. If it's asleep, there's no consciousness in it. What is it? It's just a machine, right? It's a mode, a means rather, of experiencing the world of stimuli. What we really are, in a worldly sense, is consciousness, right? The I am, the sense of existing, of awareness. That's ultimately what we are. The body comes on top of it. It's different throughout your whole lifetime. It's never the same thing. You right now is different than you at age 5 and age 70 in terms of if you're going to label the body as a part of you. It's not. Otherwise, it would be the same forever. So the body's not you. And then there's also memory, the idea of who you are based on past. Even that is layered on top of consciousness within this body apparatus. Nama Rupa. Interesting. Nama Rupa, that means name and form. That basically means physical and mental phenomena. The whole totality of it. Anyway, that's a fun little Buddhist fact. Now, so there's no referent. What does that mean? That's what I was getting to. And then I had to explain some other preliminary prerequisites first. What does that mean? It means amidst this sixth sense media experience, there's no receiver of it. The receiver, the sense of receiver, is imagined. It's always an idea held in the mind. It's developed through ignorance, avidya, self-ignorance, lack of knowledge of the Atman, of the true self. When we're not God realized, when we don't realize our own swabhava, true nature, then we experience the sixth sense media as if it's pertaining, referring back to a being. But that's not the case. It's always a generated, assumed idea that we develop the second we become conscious as a wee little lad or lass. All right? Remember lasses from Pokemon, the trainers? Remember Joey? Trainer Joey? I don't know. But, so no referent. That's imagined. That's added on. And so that's a potent thing to keep in mind when you're meditating. Particularly if you're doing the 4 frames of reference meditation, the Satipatthana. Now that is the direct vehicle for the purification of beings, meaning the elimination of the karmic notion, the karmic notional self. That's what we call ego in America. It's everyone's favorite word. Oh, the ego. I like ahankara, the original, or rather the more technical, valuable term from Sanskrit or Hinduism. Now, not that ego isn't valuable, it's just that the way that because originally it's Latin, right? It just means I, which is useful. But, it's kind of evolved into its own connotations. Anyway, ahankara means the I maker or the I doer, I believe. Now, So when you meditate on phenomena, on the sixth sense media, all the stimuli at the five senses and the sixth sense of the mind, the intellect, and you don't let it relate back to anything, now you're cooking. Now you're meditating. Why? Because meditation, the kind that leads you to God realization, to Satori, Nirvana, is the progressive removal of a sense of identity. Because sense of identity doesn't exist. Like I said, that's fashioned, it arises. It cannot be real or permanent. The reality is just that all is Brahman. That's the third thing I said, right? All is just the functioning of Brahman. It's an inevitable conclusion of realizing that there's no referent and that the six senses are all that there is. Well, if there's no referent, there's no separation. All is just the functioning of one principle, one substratum. And that substratum is Brahman. And that Brahman is all of our true nature. Brahman, as the sacred texts, ancient texts say, dwells in the heart of every creature. And that has to be true. Wherever there's consciousness, there is a spark of Brahman, the infinite sea of unmanifest. Wherever an apparatus is born, a body apparatus, there a spark of Brahman is born. Rather, it arises right there in the heart. Now, the thing is that Brahman doesn't know that it's Brahman. It has to then deal with the mystery, the game of appearing as consciousness within a being. And then it starts believing it is the body, and it starts relating all the six sense media back to that notional self. So that's why we seek pleasure as it relates to that apparatus, and we lament or loathe or resent pain as it relates to that apparatus. So dukkha, pain, stress and suffering, can only arise if there's a referent as a basis, as a foundation. So the complete cessation of dukkha, then, as we seek in Buddhism, that's nirvana, right? Nibbana, is the permanent removal of a referent. Now you can do this temporarily, or temporarily, is that the right word? You can do this temporarily along a spiritual path that is very dedicated with a high degree of resolve to achieve freedom from suffering and rebirth. But it's always going to take fabricated will to do that. It can be done. You can have continuous joy, the joy of renunciation, the joy of aspiration for God. You could say that's bhakti, right? You could abide in that joy, and then you could just eat all the bread that comes out of the mouth of God, right? To quote the Gospel of Matthew and Deuteronomy. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that cometh out of the mouth of God. The events that befall us, those are the words and the bread that comes from the mouth of God. So it's up to us to endure those with equanimity and joy. If you have joy in your heart, the joy of renunciation and striving for God, then you can take the unpleasant as much as possible. Look at St. Paul. That was his passion. His passion was eating shit for the sake of the Lord. He loved it. If you read his letters, you'll see that. He'll be like, I'm a slave to Christ. I wear these chains in the name of Christ. And he means that all in a positive sense, of course. Like, it's all rhetoric. Like, don't take it literally. Oh, I'm a slave to Christ. No, he means it in a good way. I wear these chains for my brothers and sisters. He's in a Roman jail, right? So you can endure anything because you're not placing your mental state in dependence on what's happening in the world. That's the normal way of the mind, right? Of a karmic being. We let our mental state be dependent on what's occurring in the world. So we're letting conditions choose how we feel ultimately. That's the default factory setting. The spiritual path is about becoming a conscious master of your mental state, of how do you relate to what happens in the Saha world. That's what it's called in Mahayana Buddhism, I believe. Saha world. It means like the world of disintegration. Everything's inconstant, passes away in a night. Becoming an adept, a master, means you, using your perceptions, using your mental faculties and qualities, are in charge of your own happiness. It's a skill. It's an ability. It takes resolve, it takes desire. To be happy, to be free, and to become masterful, unafflicted by anything. So, that's possible. That's what the spiritual path is. That's the Buddhist path. It's even the Christian path, ultimately. It's just a matter of, are you consciously thinking of it that way or not? It's about becoming happy and throwing dukkha in the waste bin. Alright, so my Mahavakyas. What did I say? There's no referent. So all this is Brahman. This is consciousness talking to consciousness, as Nisargadatta would say, and all the other sages, for that matter. But he particularly mentioned that verbatim. I believe it was him, not Ramana, though Ramana would agree. This is a conversation between consciousness to consciousness. It's just a bunch of pixels moving and functioning, right? There's no referent, therefore all is Brahman. The second is a corollary to that. Phenomena have no self-nature. Okay, if there's no referent, there's no other either. Self and other. That's what I mean by referent. Self. It's a more technical way of saying self. Because self always has the connotation of memory and personhood and things like that, which isn't as useful as the word referent. You'll find in your meditations. Figure out what works for yourself in different scenarios. That's always going to be the case. So, use your brain. But keep that tool in your toolbox, in your back pocket, bro, right next to your pack of 5 gum. Or Big Red. Or Little League Chew. No. Big League Chew. Little League Chew. Mad funny. Okay, phenomena have no self-nature. Meaning, if something arises and passes away, it's not real, it's virtual. Alright, it exists, but virtual. Meaning, it only appears to have permanence. The mind perceives it as if it does. The mind perceives body as if it's permanent. We all know that we age and grow old and die, but our mind doesn't think of it that way. We would all agree to that. But the way our mind is functioning is as if we're a permanent entity, which causes problems. Because when those entities change, we become distressed. We lament, we sorrow. We become angry. So the question is that entity, is that apparently abiding phenomenon, is it the body or is it something external? A circumstance, an object, a person? All of these things you have to be mindful that they're illusion. They're placeholders, they're variables, they're virtual. Yes, we play the game, right? You don't want to just act like a jackass, like you're in a dream. Like, oh, I'm gonna, actually, no. We gotta be careful about what words we choose here on YouTube, right? You don't want to do stupid shit. That's not what that means. It means that you don't place your mental state in dependence on what those things are doing, how they're being. If you need them to be a certain way to be happy, you're not going to be happy sooner or later. You might be lucky for a while, you might be skillful at avoiding configurations you don't prefer, but sooner or later, they're going to change, which means you're definitely going to experience dukkha of some degree. That's why in Buddhism, in spiritual paths, we're looking for that which does not change. The original source, the original nature, the Buddha nature, the deathless dimension, the unfabricated, Nibbana, unbinding. So that's what we're all looking for. The changeless, by nature, manifests in physical reality as Satchitananda, being, consciousness, bliss. That's how we experience it once we integrate with that. And that's how I think of it, by the way, most accurately, as an integration, a reintegration. Because there's no being that's realizing awakening or enlightenment. The nature of enlightenment is that you see you have always been the Atman, and that the personal self built on the body and a story, which are both changing and arose and didn't exist at the beginning, that is seen to be false. That's Sakaya Ditti. That's the first Sangyojana of Buddhism, of the 10 Sangyojana. The Sakaya Ditti, that's a self-notion. It's seen through permanently. It can't arise ever again. But that was painful. That's a good thing. You'll see how much of a fetter that was to your life, to your happiness. It's a restriction, a limitation, an affliction. That's not the best way to live life. If you're playing a video game and you think you're the character, now it's not fun anymore. Now you're actually enduring all the pains. Like you're playing Uncharted 4, you're falling off a wall as Drake, or I don't know. I forget what the... No, they're looking for Drake's treasure, I think. But anyway, yeah, like you have like someone chasing you with a gun. That's stressful. But you as the gamer, you're having a rip-roaring time. Because you know you're not that. So notice that lack of happiness is directly a cause of identifying as a referent, having a concreted nexus of identity, as I think of it. Lack of happiness comes from believing you are an identity. That's why when it's seen through, permanently, through an experience of realization, self-realization, you have eternal joy and peace evermore. Because there's nothing to be harmed, and there's nothing to be limited. There's nothing to be deprived or deficient. In Gnosticism, they call this the pleroma, the fullness. To be a karmic being in the world is deficiency. It is poverty. Because we're always lacking something. We're always looking at the things we wish we had and don't have. The fullness is achieving reintegration with the God nature. Seeing through the Sakaya Ditti, throwing that away, throwing the referent away, and unveiling your true nature as Satchitananda in manifestation. Eternal joy, eternal bliss, eternal peace. That's right. All is the functioning of Brahman. So, if you achieve the ultimate goal of yoga, of Buddhism, the path to awakening, then that is what awaits you. Alright? I think I killed 5 birds with 1 stone. Here, those are my 3 guiding phrases. My Mahavakya. There is no referent, phenomena have no self-nature. All is the functioning of Brahman. Alright, check out my watch. It's cool. Peace out, yogis.